Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ecopath seminar series. Hopefully, you guys are all getting settled in. My name is Christy Lewis. I'm assistant professor at University of Central Florida, and we are very excited to get this seminar series off the ground. And we are going to give attendees about 4 more minutes to join in, since this is the first time, and we know that folks are joining from all over the world. So right now we currently have about 57 attendees, and we should have at least 100 more come in. So hopefully in the next few minutes folks will come in. So we will just hold on for 1 second and we'll get started in just a few minutes. Thanks so much. Hello, everyone. If you're just joining, we're just waiting for a few more minutes for other people to join our seminar today. So we'll just wait about one or two more minutes. So please just make yourself comfortable, grab a nice cup of coffee or a glass of wine, depending on what time zone you're in. And we're really excited to get things going. So just hold on one or two more minutes and we'll get things going. Okay, I think we're going to get started. So again, hello everyone. Welcome to the first edition of the Ecopath seminar series. We are so excited about the enthusiasm and encouragement we have received since making the announcement just, I think it was less than 2 weeks ago. Our aim is to hold about 6 seminars per year. And I think I would like to go ahead and share my screen with you. So I will do that right now. I hope everyone has found the software easy to use. We have had a few bumps in the road per se, but we're trying to make it work. I think right now I'll just go without the PowerPoint. So again, our aim is to hold at least 6 seminars per year, and we would like to include what we're calling a bring your own question segment or workshop that will give the Ecopath community access to longtime users of the software. As many of you know, we often develop these models in a vacuum by ourselves with no one to talk to. We go to the website, go to the wiki, go to the user's manual, and we just can't always find the answer. So this is our approach in trying to close the distance that is between such a broad community spread globally. So we're going to, we've sent out a survey that most of you have filled out. We will circulate that survey again. It's been very helpful to give us ideas for topics. For folks who want to give seminars during the seminar series, we're looking for volunteers. And just to give us general feedback on future seminars. We plan to have seminars every 2 months on the last Tuesday of the month at 12 noon Eastern time. And the upcoming date, next date is July 28th, 2020, this summer. So just kind of mark your calendar there, and there'll be details coming for that. So as we have already mentioned, we've had a large response to this. 157 people have signed up, at least to watch the seminar. We may not get everybody on here, but we're just excited about starting this process. And so I just want to tell you a little bit about how this will go today, and introduce some folks. We have a panel. A seminar panelist in addition to our speaker, Natalia Serpetti. The panelists will be able to answer questions that you might have during the seminar or after, or for our short Bring Your Own Question segment. We have Sheila Haymans, European Marine Board. She was supposed to be our moderator, but we had a little bit of a hiccup with our technology, so I'm sitting in for her today. She still may be a moderator or a panelist, but if she can't hook in, she is on board and she is listening. So feel free to ask Sheila any questions you might have in the Q&A window. Again, myself from the University of Central Florida, Dr. Christy Lewis, Dr. Kim DeMutzert of George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia is on board. Billy Christensen of the University of British Columbia may also be on board. He will be watching. In addition, Carl Walter should be on board as a panelist as well. So please feel free to send those questions to Billy and Carl. And finally, we have Lee McGahey from St. Lawrence River Institute in Canada. So she is on board as well. So at any time you want to ask questions to any of us, feel free to @ our name. So @ Kim or @ Lee or @ Natalia, @ Billy, or if it's just a general question, you would put @ general and then ask your question. The Q&A window should be on the left-hand side of your screen, and you will send your questions in and we'll publish those questions as they go. After Natalia gives her seminar, we'll spend a little time answering some questions specific to her seminar. And then we will open it up for about a 15-minute session of Bring Your Own Question. And we're excited to see if we can help you guys get unstuck if you have some hard modeling questions for us. But with that said, I would like to go ahead and introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Natalia Serpetti. Dr. Serpetti is interested in understanding the processes that govern the dynamics of marine ecosystems and the forces that regulate and affect it. She does this through modeling approaches that help us understand how different ecosystem levels are interacting. She's able to simulate and predict future scenarios of how the entire ecosystem might function. Her specific research interests cover a range of ecosystem levels and focus on how to connect all ecosystems elements using multidisciplinary modeling approach, as you well know as Ecopath with Ecosim and Ecospace. So I'm very excited to share with you this time. Natalia, if you could put your PowerPoint in the queue, I can load it up for you.
I will.
Okay, great. All right, everyone. So from now on, I'll be muting myself. I am excited for you guys to hear an exciting talk from Dr. Serpetti, and I will send her live to you right now. Have fun and enjoy yourself.
Ready to go then?
I think it's all yours. Go for it.
Okay, thank you everyone for being here today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm here today to talk about modeling small-scale impact of multi-purpose platform in the west coast of Scotland. And this is an output for a project that I call INO-MPP, that stands for Investigation of the Novel Challenges of an Integrated Offshore Multi-Purpose Platform, and that is why we call it an INO-MPP. I am based in Scotland. Oh, my slides doesn't go. There we go. I'm based in Scotland, which is the country, the northern country of the United Kingdom. The laboratory is based in this nice peninsula. It's a beautiful landscape. Then it doesn't look like that most of the year because it rains 300 days a year. SAMS is the Scottish Association for Marine Science. You can see the website here in this slide. And it's a very heterogeneous laboratory research. Then have different research area for dynamic coast, blue economy, and the ocean system that covers more or less every aspect of the marine ecosystem, from aquaculture, climate change, fisheries, oceanography, biogeochemistry, and also biotechnology. So, but we are here today to talk about Ecopath with Ecosim and Ecospace. So the model I use here is an Ecopath model that have 9 fishing fleets and 43 functional groups. Then spans from primary producers to top predator mammal and seabirds and seals. And the model has been created for the first time in 2005 and deeply modified in 2011. There is also an Ecosim model, where a series of Ecosims model for this Ecopath. We have been using them to look at investigating gadoid stock decline. In 2015, I used it to look at climate change impact in terms of rising water temperature. 3 years ago already, and a colleague of mine used it to look for good environmental state indicators. There is also a couple and now 3 different ecospace models that have been used to look at renewable energy devices impact. And a couple of years ago was used by master students to look at the impact of noise from shipping and acoustic deterrent devices, impact of cetaceans. This is the large scale, that is how I call it, ecospace model, as it looks like currently. There are different habitats in here, sea lochs and bays. This is just the continental shelf. And sediment types from mud, rock, sand, and sediments at different depth. However, today I show you a new model that is zoomed in from this model where this red star is to look at the impact of multi-purpose platform. Then from now on, I will call it MPP. But what is an MPP? So Scotland is aiming to triple the salmon farming production by 2050. And to do so for spatial management, probably these farming sites, they will be located more offshore in a more exposed area to severe weather condition. And I promise you in winter is quite rough here. So our solution is the co-location of marine renewable energy devices co-located beside aquaculture site, creating a multi-purpose platform or MPPs. So here you can see the continental shelf of the west coast of Scotland. The red stars indicate the site we are looking at, which is the Isle of Muck. You can see the map on again in this slide. In our Wirchat site, we co-located wind turbines, then provide the energy for the farm operations, as well as shelter the farm from the weather conditions. In Isle of Muck, there is already a salmon farm, then is the blue symbols over here. However, we decided to locate our Wirchat site in the west, in southwest, because it's more exposed, but we can still use monitoring data that have been collected over the year. In the next slide here, courtesy to the Professor Ben Wilson and Dr. Stephen Benjamins, I'm trying to summarize the elements that can be part of a multi-purpose platform and the pressure that they can derive on the ecosystem, they can derive for these MPPs. So we can have an aquaculture site that generally is cages of fish farming or mussel farming, co-located with wind turbine, then can be floating wind turbine or anchor or living over a barge. It can be a structure, a base for accommodations, for instance. Another floating structure then is a storage for energy with a photovoltaic panel in top, for instance. And also a wave device converter that convert energy using the energy from the waves. All these floating structures need somehow to be anchored to the seabed through a mooring systems. So all these elements, then I call it from the MPPs, can have different pressure in the ecosystems. And here I just summarize some of them. The wind turbine can make a noise, then propagate in the air and in the water, so underwater noise. This structure can be also attracting seabirds, because seabirds then fly over the sea. They like to have a resting structure to sit on it. The distraction can be a problem for marine mammals, then can have collision or any kind of disturbance and avoidance from these structures. The structure can also create an artificial reef effect or be a settlement surface for invasive species. When we look at the aquaculture site, we can have attraction from mammals or other top predators. Then there can be an excess of organic matter as excess of feeding or excess of waste from the fish, then can reach the seabeds. So there is an enrichment of the detritus, then in some case can bring to anoxia in the sediment, for instance. And another element then recently I added is that this increase of organic matter that reach the seabed can be recycled through sediment mineralization processes, creating a flux of nutrients then can be released in the water column through recycled productions. Now, on the model, I simplified the structure. I didn't use all these elements, neither all this pressure, and I start simple. So for the MPP elements in this case of studies, I looked at wind turbine on a floating barge, and the pressures from these elements is underwater noise and the potentially seabird mortality due to birds then flying through the wind turbine and getting killed by. And another element is the farming cages, and the pressure then I put in the model is attraction of top predators and gadoids and seals and seabirds, an enrichment of the detritus due to the excess of organic matter then come out from the cages, and the recycled production then create a flux of water nutrient loading then coming back to the water column. So these are the elements and the pressure that I'm considering in this experiment of ecospace. So I create a new ecospace model. Is an high resolution, so the grids is about 100 meters resolution, and the MPPs then in the south west is about 10 kilometers from the model boundaries. Now, in this side of the planet, the latitude-longitude ratio is 2:1, so basically the grid cells are not square, they're rectangular. However, we know that in ecospace we need an ASCII grid that is considering a ratio 1:1. So the grid, when we create the ecospace model, we lose the georeference resolution and we have a bit of a changing shape of this map. However, it's the new ecospace for the island map. Then have sediments, sand, mixed sediments and mud at different depth, same of the large scale. And then we add also a farming habitat that is coupled into the ecospace using the temporal spatial framework. So the model started in the Ecopath model started in 1985, and the Ecosim model is run for 30 years up to 2013. In our case, I use the MPP element or site or pressure that are coming into the model in Ecospace in 2011. And the MPP site is kept operational for 3 years, so to the end of my Ecosim simulations. So you can see here, I also create a region around the farming habitat. Then it's just these 3 cells, so you can see it's slightly darkening here. And the region is an exclusion zone for fisheries. And also I extracted the output of the Ecospace model within this region to compare to a baseline that is basically the model without the MPPs. So the Spatial Temporal Framework is a plugin that was created in 2013, and is a brilliant plugin that allows us to bridge the gap between the Ecospace and GIS, or any kind of external driver that we need to couple into the model in time and space. So we can decide, like in this case, in which time of your simulation the farming or the pressure can kick in and interface with your base map. So now, let's have a look at the elements that I used. A wind turbine can produce a low frequency noise that has an impact on arbor porpoise and arbor seals. So to simulate the pressure, I apply a species-specific response function to a distance layer from the low frequency noise source. So you can see it here in this map. Now I use a distance from the source of noise because creating a map of the acoustic low frequency noise is quite complicated and required quite a lot of data. Is also depending of the sites you are considering, depending of the depth of the ecosystem, and also the geomorphology and the sediments that is around on the rocks if they're there. So the easiest way was to make a layer of distance, and there are several studies that looked at, then observed that arbor porpoise avoid sheep noise and chase feeding behavior at distances between 1 kilometer up to 7 kilometers. So this one is, so I built it up a response function, it's the orange one in these graphs, where we have scaling the consumption rates from 1 kilometer up to 7 kilometers from the noise source. Now, this study looked at a source of noise and coming from shipping. So it's actually a mobile source of noise. In this case, we are just assuming the same response for a static noise, so it might not be the best way of doing it. Arbor seals show avoidance up to from 500 meters from a tidal turbine noise that is very similar to the wind turbine noise, and apologies for the simplification in here, up to 2 kilometers from this source. So again, we create a response function, then scaling the consumption rates from 500 meters to 2 kilometers. The wind turbine also seems to be able to kill some species that result when they fly through the wind turbine. Now, within the InnoMPP project, there was a side project that looked at the sensitive seabird species, then they can be killed by a wind turbine. The paper is in preparation now, so you have to wait for this one to come out to find out a bit more. But these 4 species that were sensitive represented 0.03% of the total biomass of my seabirds group. So not a big representation in here. And to simulate this pressure, I apply a forcing relative biomass reduction of 0.03 at the MPP sites. I actually tried also using a layer of other mortality to apply to the ecospace, and I got similar results. When we had the farming site, we had, in this case, cages of fish farmed, and we have an attraction of top predator to this cage. The top predator in consideration are arbor seals, gadoids, and seabirds. And there are several studies listed in this slide then looking at the attraction of these species. So to simulate this pressure, I change relatively the habitat foraging usage for the species to simulate this attraction. Then I try to simulate the detritus enrichment for the farming, also for the cages. To do so, we use a model called New Depot Mod for the Isle of Muck. New Depot Mod is a particle size tracking. Then it simulates the fish farm depositional footprint caused by the waste on the seafloor from these cages. And for waste, again, we mean excess of food and waste from the fish. So we use this software to simulate the farming footprint, that is how I call it. The model configuration have 8 cages with a total production of 24,000 tons, 100 tons of salmon per year. We also compare these outputs with sites that were more inshore, and we found that the footprint is less intense in these more offshore areas, but also more spread, of course, due to the currents and the advections. In fact, the New Depot Mod is also coupled with an oceanographic model that simulates the currents and the advection around the sites. The model was run for a year, and here you can see a simulation for the first 30 days, showing the farm footprint that cover about 2 kilometers. The output can be extracted as organic matter or as carbon or any other nutrients, and can be averaged. In my case, I extracted as a relative increase. So imagine around is 0, and the footprint you can see here is a relative increase to a baseline, basically no footprint, of carbon per meter square per year. And I average this output over a grid of 100 meters to match the resolutions of the ecospace. So we extracted this farming footprint relatively, and I use it to relatively forcing the biomass of the detritus accordingly. So you can see here the farming footprint from New Depot Mod and the data introduced into R to convert this one to an ASCII file to coupled into our Ecopath, Ecospace. This coupling is actually happen monthly. So the annual farmer footprint has been divided by 12 and coupled every month. And the last pressure is about water nutrient loading. Now imagine we have so much of organic matter that reach the seabeds, and this organic matter is mineralized by the sediments, by bacteria and macrofauna in general. I did a PhD in sediment regeneration rates by sediment metabolism too many years ago now, and I was looking at the flux of nitrate then, or actually every unit nutrients, but nitrate in this case, then get remineralized over the year and back into the water column to get used by primary producer the following year. And I found then 25% of the dissolvent organic nitrogen is basically coming from recycled production. So 25% of the nitrate is due to recycled production. My PhD was in the east side of in the North Sea, the east side of Scotland. Here we are in the west side, completely different ecosystems. However, both ecosystems, they are nitrate limited. That means that in spring, the phytoplankton bloom stops when the nitrate is completely depleted into the water. So based on that, I made an assumption that is a rough assumption. Then we have the same contributions of recycled production. And so we will have, in the case of detritus enrichment, a 25% more primary productivity due to 25% more nitrate. And I do agree it's a rough assumption. So to summarize all of this, I ran 6 scenarios, a baseline, which is my Ecopath, Ecosim, Ecospace without the MPPs, and scenarios with just the wind turbine, so the impact of low frequency noise and the killing sensitive seabird species. Then scenarios 3, it's the attraction of selected top predator by the farming habitat. Then on scenarios 4, I use the attraction, so scenarios 3, plus the detritus enrichment from the new depot mod output. And the scenarios 5, I use the 4, so plus the nutrient loading by recycled productions, and then all these elements of pressure all together to look at the cumulative impact. Okay, after all of these methods, let's look some results. Overall, you can see then here we are running, we are showing the relative biomass within the region, so it's an average within the region. The baseline is basically 1. So every bar here it diverges from that one baseline, means a change due to under different scenarios. You can see that overall we have an increase of relative biomass for many groups. That's because in all our scenarios, or most of it, we are simulating an higher production within the system, either from the detritus or from the loading nutrients from the recycled production. But let's have a look more in details of these results under the different scenarios. So wind turbine create a dislocation of Akbar porpoise because the response function we use is quite strong. Then scale the consumption between 1 and 7 kilometers. So we have the Akbar porpoise are moving away from our region. And remember, the region is basically 2.5 or 3.5 kilometers, so it's not a huge area. Arba seals is less responsive to this impact because the response function was less strong. Seabirds can be killed by the wind turbine. However, when we look at the absolute biomass of the systems, we can see that actually only Akbar porpoise significantly decrease within the region, and any other relative changes is significant, they're not. When we looked at the gadoids, most of the gadoids were attracted by the farms. So under the scenario 3, 4, and 5, we have and the cumulative, we have an increase of biomass for all the gadoids. The only element through the wind farm shows a decrease of whiting under these scenarios. Then it was actually significant even when we look at the absolute biomass values. And that is an effect then due to the food web. So we have the Akbar porpoise are moving away from our region. And dolphins, then they are in competition with Akbar porpoise, increase their predation pressure on whiting, and actually not gadoids, but especially whiting, creating this decline. However, I want to look at these trends a bit more carefully. So I looked at the trend within the ecospace, tempora spatial, and I can see then actually this impact is due to an impact on immature whiting, then cascade to the adult through the multi-stanza link. I can also see then this is a quick response of the whiting when we add the MPP, the MPP's elements, or the wind turbine elements in this case. But we can also see then the model is reaching a new equilibrium, and also the adult seems then they are reaching a new equilibrium with time. So maybe if we are running this model to steady state, the model will find a new equilibrium, and the impact of the whiting it wouldn't be that significant. When we look at scenarios 4, 5, and 6, we have detritus enrichments first, and that has an impact, of course, on the benthic side of the food web. So the detritus with apifauna, infauna, crustacean, crabs, lobster, and nephrops in this case. Some interesting look to some of these responses. I found that then under scenarios 4, nephrops decrease due to the predation pressure of crustaceans. However, when we add the recycled production, we actually add so much more production into the system, then and more food also for nephrops, then this decline get counterbalance is a trade-off between these two scenarios. The decline of lobster is due to a cannibalism loop, because there are species within this group that are eating each other. So while we are adding biomass and adding food, we are also adding predation pressure. So the overall decline is under all these scenarios. Please keep in mind that this decline is basically relatively to 0.95. So it's basically not evident when we look at the absolute biomass values. And kelp decline only because there is apifauna is the only predator on kelp, and it's only 10%. That's because nothing really eat kelp alive. So when we look at the biomass and absolute values, we can see that the changes are significant or slightly significant only for crustaceans and apifauna in this case. Last, when we add the recycled production, then we have a strong impact through the phytoplankton production, then cascade through the food web to small and large zooplankton, all the way up to herrings. However, again, when we look at absolute numbers, we can see then the significant change regarding only phytoplankton and small zooplankton and maybe sandioles. Okay, so now let's have a look, and that's the last results of some maps. Then they are always good on the eyes. This you can see it's the baseline, so it's the ecospace run without the MPP. I compare this with just the cumulative scenarios. For top-down control, I use arbor porpoise and cod because they are the top predator that shows more change under the cumulative scenarios. And for the bottom up, I use the phytoplankton, so the pelagic, in some extent, cascade, and the detritus cascade. When we run this through, you can see the dislocation of arbor porpoise to the noise and the attraction of cod. However, these are changing of these two top-down control didn't cascade through the food web significantly. So we didn't see a significant change of the prey of this top predator. When we look at the bottom-up impact, we can see that the phytoplankton increase cascade through the small zooplankton, the large zooplankton, and the signal get weaker, but also spreading. Same things for detritus to infauna and apifauna. To summarize, seabirds mortality by wind turbine is affecting only 0.03% of the biomass group. No significant impact was detected. The farming footprint was impacted to bottom-up control through the phytoplankton growth driven by nutrient loading and the detritus enrichment. Changes of bottom-up drivers show the highest impact within the food web. Running the scenarios one at a time allowed us to disentangle the conflict and the synergies of the MPP elements. And the MPP elements impact in different pathways of the food web. So apart the reduction of whiting under the wind turbine scenarios, no strong evidence has been found for cumulative impact. And that's it for me. I want to thank the co-authors of these presentations and also the funding agency. This project was funded by APSRC and NERC, and also the National Natural Science Foundation of China. And of course, thank you for the panelists and all of you for listening. Thank you.
Great job, Natalia. So excited. What a interesting project. We do have one question from Sheila. She was wondering if in your results within the region, do you mean within the total area or an area around your site? I think that's when you were showing some of the bar graphs.
Yeah, it's the region. So it's this region showed in this slide, or also on this region. So I looked only within this region, not the entire boundaries of the model.
Okay, that makes sense. We are so excited to see these the new Ecospace being used, and we're excited at seeing at least the implications of wind turbines. I think that's going to be really important as we go. My question to you is, if what are you going to make any changes to this in the future? And if you had to do it over again, would you make any changes to what you've done in this model?
I'm gonna do it again only if there will be some expert of top predator, which is my weaknesses in there. They gave me better responses or response function to this for the noise, especially. The boundaries for Arba seals between 500 meters and 2 kilometers is actually coming from preliminary results that have been presented on a conference, Environmental Interaction of Marine Renewable Energy, last month. And then, of course, it was virtual. And I showed the preliminary results of this presentation then, and I already changed based on what I found through that conference. So I already ran this a few times. I also ran it in different ways the first time. So the way I was cumulative add the impact through the scenarios. And I basically choose this way on combining pressures because it was the one that showed more interesting cumulative or impact compared to what I was doing the first time.
Sure, that makes sense. Well, great. So we'd like to open up the floor. If anyone has any other questions for Natalia, please feel free to send them in through the Q&A platform that should be on the right-hand side. Looks like there's something coming through here. Another question from Sheila. How did you change the dispersal rates when you went from the large-scale Ecospace to this small-scale Ecospace model?
I don't, because Ecospace do it up by himself. So the dispersal is the swimming speed in some extent, or the wandering rates of moving around divided by the size of the cell. So when you change the resolutions of the dispersal, Ecospace is changing itself.
Okay, great. If you have any follow-up questions, Sheila, just throw them out there. So the next question is from Joe. Hi, Joe. How are you doing? I'm glad you're on board. How did you assess significant for wind turbine impacts on seabirds? Statistical tests of different model runs?
No, I didn't. It's at the moment is only by eye. I can probably run Monte Carlo to see the uncertainties around our values. However, 0.03% is quite small. So when I'm saying it's not significant, it's based on that small number.
Gotcha. Okay. And it looks like Carl Walters is with us and has a question. He says, in Canada, fish farmers are allowed to kill nuisance marine mammals like seals. What would allowing that do to your predictions? Carl, throw the curveball.
And over here, many years ago, I know that there was some shooting of seals. At the moment, Scotland is experimenting acoustic deterrent devices called the ADDs. Then it's a high frequency noise pitch. Then they're attaching to cages, and they are supposed to scare away the seals. And it seems then they don't, and they scared away more porpoise than seals. That it's depending of the hearing capability of this top predator. Arba porpoise seems to be very sensitive to high frequency noise, so they are annoyed by the ADDs more than the seals. There are lots of issues around the noise and lots of things that we don't know. And that is why I think it's the weaknesses of all of this is we need to know more of this species-specific response function. Also, top predator, mammal especially, they have a complex behavior and they get used to noise. And we don't know how that is going to change the response function. Very much like us than we used to do. Well, for me, living in urban, pretty silence, and I lived in busy town and I got used to the noise, and cetaceans are doing the same. So we don't know much about adaptation of the background noise by the species. So no, they are not killing them at the moment.
Okay, thanks. And it looks like we have another question from Hadayet. Also wondering about significant difference in your result. Did you, I think she's asked, this person's asking if you tested any kind of significant difference between the scenarios, is what I'm hearing.
No, I didn't do any statistical test yet.
But is that forthcoming?
I want to validate the model in different way. One way, well, we have in plan to actually try to validate our number at the sea, because there are lots of fish farming around here. There are different ways I want to validate the Ecosim that I run in the background. I've done it in the past when I published it for the, I use cross validation for the Ecosim, but for the Ecospace, I didn't do any significant test. The model runs to 2013, so maybe I can use data from 2013 to 2020 to see if the model responds in a proper manner as a external data sets for cross-validation. But on Ecospace, I think the only way on doing it is actually try to do some experiments where we put a low frequency noise and see if the species are responding like we are predicting.
Okay, well, thanks so much. And quickly, I think Sheila had a follow-up. She said she mentions that you didn't quite answer Carl's question. She wants to know what would happen if you kill them.
I don't know, because I didn't test it, but one way on doing it is in Ecospace, you can couple a mortality layers. So if you know how many that have been killed, you can force relative the biomass to decreases either through mortality or forcing the relative biomass. And so if you kill them, they will, within Ecospace, is their predation pressure go down on the food web from the top down, and seals have vulnerability slightly over 2 over their prey. So a change of the biomass of the seals, it might cascade through the food web in a stronger than some other top predator. I don't know, I didn't test it.
Right, great. And just for clarification, you did not use the spatial temporal data framework in Ecospace, correct?
Yeah, I did.
You did?
So
okay. And how many years, I think someone's asking, so that question is kind of a follow-up. I think Ronaldo is asking, how many years did you run the model?
The model runs, Ecopath Ecosim runs from 1985 to 2013, and the MPP elements are coupled through the spatial temporal framework monthly from 2011.
Okay, great, yes.
So
great.
Every month from 2011 to January to December 2013.
Got it. And then it looks like we have a note from Rasa, just a suggestion. Depending on bird species, avoidance functions might be added to the wind turbines. For example, wintering divers have been studied in this topic using transmitters or visual observations. North Sea, at least, this would be similar as mammals here. So just a comment. Looks like we have another question. I wonder why you didn't consider elasmobranchs in your model.
I don't have that many. I have the only one I have, they are, well, sharks. They are benthing sharks. They are actually a big population, I think, of rays. But no, I didn't. It's just I didn't have information to run the model. So, to simulate this, you can go wild and apply to as many, but it was the first time I was doing it, and I want to start with the key species that they were representative here. But of course, you can, if you have information, you can use rays as well.
Absolutely, great. And it looks like Renato has a follow-up question. I understand that the impact of farm habitat is equal to farm habitat plus detritus enrichment. Have you any idea why this is happening?
Not sure if I understood the questions. I had scenarios of 3, then it was attraction from the farming habitat, and then scenario 4 where I had the attraction plus the detritum enrichment.
And he's wondering, I think he's understanding that they're the same result, like the results were not different, but he could maybe have misunderstood the plots if you wanted to put it back up there.
So it's basically the difference between 4 and 5, no, 3 and 4 and... Should I share it again?
Sure. Absolutely. There you go.
So on scenario 3, it's just the attraction. And then scenario 4 is only the detritus enrichment, so the grays. And then the farm habitat is, the 5 is also recycled production. So they are going all in the same direction. That I think is what he means.
Okay.
And it's because we are just adding productivity into the system, either from just the detritus, then it's food for many bottom-up controls in some extent, and they are both bottom-up. So it's basically it's a more energy from the entire system, and that is why they're going all in the same direction. However, when you look at recycled productions, the recycled production have a stronger impact on the pelagic area, so phytoplankton, zooplankton, up to herrings, and you don't see these changing in the other scenarios. Maybe all together, but it was probably too confusing.
It's a lot of data there, Natalia.
There's a lot of data there.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest problems, right? With all of the eco space output is dealing with all of the information that's coming out. Well, let me shoot you another question from Carl Walters. Would an increased biomass of species that the mammals eat, for example, cod, reduce the top-down effect, as you say?
Yes, we had attraction of cod, and there was no. I think it's because the region is so small than we are considering. Then there was, it might be a dispersion due to the dispersal. I don't know, but there was not a strong impact on the changing of cod on their prey. And cod is actually have a top-down control again in terms of vulnerabilities on the fitting Ecosim. So you're expecting that the changes of cod have a strong impact on their prey, but probably because we are speaking about a small region. Maybe I should compare the region and the entire boundaries to compare it.
Sure. Absolutely. Thanks so much. Okay, Ecopath community, are there any last questions directly for Natalia? And if not, we can open the session up to our Bring Your Own Questions session. I can come back up for a minute here and give Natalia a break. Okay, totally working. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Okay, looks like we had one question pop in here. Oh, one more from somebody. Here we go. Natalia, one more question. Thank you for the presentation. My question is there any final changes around wind farm construction in the seawater? So increasing habitat diversity and species richness, etc. If it is, yes, is there any relation between marine mammals feeding?
There is, but it's not in the model. There are SAMS did quite a few experiments about artificial reefs and reef effect from benthic fauna that it lives in these constructions. Keep in mind also then this structure they get anti-fouling and they get cleaned up quite a lot to avoiding this problem. So I don't think in modeling wise, I'm sure then under ecospace models it hasn't not be looking at it. There are some infographic experiments also they're doing, even in the North Sea, I think, where they're taking pictures of the oil and gas infrastructure because they've been there for a long time, and they can measure the biomass increasing, growing over the structure as a proper artificial reef impact. So you can somehow estimate the increase of biomass for suspensive feeder, for instance, they're growing on the structure. But I didn't put this element in the model.
Gotcha, great. Carl has another question, actually. You're not off the hot seat yet, Natalia. Did you try runs with coarser grid? Would likely give the same trophic response pattern, allow you to do lots of runs to assess uncertainty and the predictions. I guess I think he's talking about processing speed here, which is definitely a concern when it comes to when we get to larger models.
Yeah, well, I had the problem then at the beginning. I have my large scale impact, then large scale ecospace, then is 7 by 7 kilometers grid. And I have to create a zoom in models because otherwise all this pressure from a farm would basically disappear on a large scale. So one step it could be using find a way of scaling up the impact you find on a zoom in model to the large scale model, or you can even simulate what if every farming site offshore will become MPPs to try to increase the impact. But if I run these impacts, like 7 kilometers is a strong response, but it's basically one cell on my large scale. So maybe I should do progressive increasing grids and see if the output changes.
Okay, great.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, yeah, definitely a good idea. So, all right. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and transition to opening the floor up to bring your own question. And I believe Pauline has actually started this off. And I just want to remind everyone that in addition to Natalia and me, Christy Lewis, we do have Dr. Kim DeMutzert as a panelist. Dr. Lee Magahi as a panelist. Sheila is online, as you've all seen there. She is a panelist as well. In addition, we have Billy Christensen and Carl Walters here, as you've all seen here with the questions. So please feel free to shoot any questions. We'll do this for about 10 minutes or so and see if anyone has questions to consider. And yeah, we can just start taking those questions. And those of us who have video, we can send those along so you guys can kind of connect with us. So does anyone want to take Pauline's question, which is, hi, and thank you for a great seminar. I've been trying to force biomass accumulation for detritus over time with no luck yet. Any suggestions? Does anybody want to take that?
Well, I can try. Well, first of all, need to know if Pauline used the special temporal framework. And if this coupling, for me, was very different if I was using a monthly coupling compared to annual coupling, because Ecospace runs monthly. If you do it annually, you will have a peak of the detritus enrichments or your layer forcing at January, but then nothing comes through for 12 months. So you will have a big spike and then a decline to December and then another big spike. And I didn't like that because I needed then a continuous feeding to the detritus enrichment. But it did work for me, and I used the special temporal framework forcing for detritus the biomass in a relatively way. So I don't know if Pauline used the special temporal framework or not.
Yeah, thanks so much. And if you need to follow up with your questions, please let us know if we didn't answer it. It looks, thank you for answering. Does anyone want to take the next question we have from Oriol? hello, thank you for the seminar. I recently started using Ecosim, so maybe my question looks quite basic to most of you. That's okay, that's why we're here, so don't apologize. I have created an Ecosim model to assess the impact of fishing on the ecosystem on top predators. When adding the fishing effort in the model, the sum of squares values increase. Does it mean that fishing does not have an effect on the system? Who wants to take this one? Anyone want to take this? Lee, Kim, Sheila, Billy, anyone want to answer out there? We'll send your responses along. I think
This is Kim.
Kim wants to, I'll send you live, Kim.
Yeah, okay. If you're adding more observations to your model, your sums of squares can just increase because there's more observations that can have a deviation from your model. I wouldn't say that means your fishing doesn't have an effect. I would just to see if fishing has an effect, don't look at your sums of squares, look at how your model changes by including the fishery or not. I cannot imagine it does not have an effect. It will probably bring down the biomass on whatever species you're fishing on. So look at a model run with the fishing and a model run without the fishing, and compare the two, and that will tell you what effect your fishing has.
I think that's a good answer, Kim. And to follow up on Pauline, she says she used the other production form and only used Ecopath and Ecosim, Natalia. So, okay, well, thanks, Kim, for answering that. That was going to be my response. You'd have to run a lot of simulations, Oriel, to kind of see how your model is impacted by adding those observations. So that's what I would also suggest as well. Lynn, it says not a question, but yes, I have the same. It's merely because you're adding more information and uncertainty. It's fine. It's just carry on with the fitting with versus an environmental parameters. Thank you, Lynn. I think that's Lynn Shannon. Hello. Let's see if we have any more questions coming through. Sheila wanted to respond. I think hopefully I'm not sure. I don't think we're seeing this, but Sheila says to Oriel, so if your effort is a driver, it should not be included in the calculation of the sum of squares. So if you have an increase in sum of squares, then you might be using your effort as the wrong value in your CSV file. So there is a difference between that. So just make sure you double check how your data are entered into the model. It's a good point, Sheila. Okay, all right. So I will again open the floor up. If anybody has any questions, we're happy to hear them. Looks like we have a new question. I'll go ahead and publish that. Okay, the question is, hello, firstly, great seminar and brilliant idea to hold EWE webinars. Yes, we are excited as well. I am a newbie in the field of EWE as I only used the software for my master's thesis last summer and haven't had a chance to get back to it. Do you have any suggestions for materials that newbies could use to support their learning? Any particularly good paper in addition to Dr. Christensen and Dr. Walter's user's guides? Well, I think this is one of the, I'll kind of take this question. If you guys want to chime in, please jump in. I think there's tons of papers, and actually Vili does keep track of all of the EWE papers that come out year to year. So many of us in the group have a huge file with all of the papers that have come out over the years. And I'm pretty sure, Vili, if you want to chime in here, you're keeping that up to date. We had an updated version of that at the Ecopath 35 conference that we had. There are lots of papers out there that we could point you to, but I would say that we're starting a community here. We're trying to be in connection. So please feel free to reach out to any of us that you see. We're a tight-knit community, so feel free to send us emails, etc. if you have questions. There is the user guide that is provided with Ecopath is useful, but we understand that as we develop Ecopath and Ecosim and Ecospace, it becomes outdated, and we just don't have the manpower to keep it updated. There is a wiki that one of our programmers, Jeroen Steenbeek, has online, and that wiki is pretty useful. And it is indeed updated, I believe, a little bit more often than the user guide, because the user guide hasn't been updated in years. So I would suggest going to the wiki, emailing the community of users of Ecopath, going to the website, checking out who is on the board and the governing board, the training. I'm on the training board. Kim is on the training board. Sheila has been running training. So there's lots of us out there that are willing to help. So just don't be shy about asking questions. Does anybody else want to follow up with that? As far as any resources that they might be able to find? Okay. All right. I haven't seen any new questions pop in there. Vili shared the link to the papers. There's about 800 papers in there, so whoever the anonymous person who asked that, there's the link. And then from Ruth, do we have any suggestion on how to introduce the effect of migratory species in a model on the coastal waters of an oceanic island? Does anybody want to take a stab at that? Migration is pretty hard in ecospace, so it's not something that I know of that we have able to wrap our brain around. Has anybody figured out a proxy for that in some way?
Christy, I can just give a quick answer to how I did it in my oceanic model.
Sure.
It's a bit of a cheat, I guess, in a way, but we just ended up adjusting the biomass because we got it obviously over a year for the Ecopath model, and then you've got migratory species. So just factoring it down for the amount of time that they spend in your system, so that obviously the amount that they leave in that system and the amount they take out of it is accounted for. So it's just adjusting the biomass according to the amount of time they spend there, and then that way they can feed within the system and leave detritus within the system, but then exit. So that would be my suggestion.
Thank you so much, Lee. I appreciate your help. All right, looks like Joe Lutzkowitz has a question for Carl. Carl, this is from Joe. How to parameterize EcoTracer? Can we use direct absorption rate to simulate the production by a toxin and a harmful algal bloom? The dinoflagellate we are studying produces a toxin internally in its cell, non-externally in the environment. How do we internalize this toxin production in the model? So we'll give Carl a second to respond to Joe's question. And it looks like we have some more questions coming in. Vili, here's another question for you. I have a situation. Let's see, let me publish these for Vili and Joe. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so we have, okay, yep, another question for Vili. I have a situation where I want to do some uncertainty analyses. Out of many functional groups, I present my results on a community group-wise, several functional groups within a community group. My output of the input parameters is obviously species by functional group specific. So while I run a GLM, should I pull all the input and output parameters community-wise? My results are presented community-wise, or would be good to run the species specific? That is a heck of a question. So I'll let Vili digest that one. Hopefully Joe's question at Carl will be addressed. And it looks like we also need Billy to provide a key to the link he provided for the papers. So we'll just stand by. I'm trying to understand how you had a Yet's question. If anybody has a comment before Billy gets to it, that's on the panel here, please chime in. Okay. Does anybody else have any comments on either of these questions from Joe or Hedda yet? Okay. And if you, Joe, we can have Carl follow up with you as well if we don't hear back, because I don't want to belabor this too much. And Hedda, if you want to follow up to Billy with this specific question, feel free to do so. Yeah. Okay, so here we go. Billy. Billy says, yeah, I know. Let me publish Carl's answer to Joe. Yeah, Billy, I understand you were supposed to be able to join as a panelist. He doesn't want to. Yeah, I'll just have Hedda yet. If you could just email Billy directly that question, I'm sure he'll be happy to answer it. So, Joe, you should be able to see Carl's answer. It looks like it doesn't address that issue yet. Okay, well, we're at 12 minutes past the hour. I think we're going to have to close up shop for now. If there's any questions, feel free to respond to oh, there's some more things coming through. I think Sheila is responding to Hayadette, and then Billy said try this link instead, see if that one works. So if someone could test that out real quick in the panel to make sure that works, that would be helpful. Okay, one more. Okay, great. So we'll talk offline. So I think that's all for now. If any of the panelists have anything to say, please just chime in. And if there's any last moments, we can just close out shop here. So just a reminder of the time of the next seminar is going to be July 28th, later this summer. We have not decided on a new a seminar speaker for that version yet, so please feel free to email one of us if you're interested. And we're so thankful that you came today. Thank you so much to our seminar speaker, Natalia. You did a great job. Everybody is digitally clapping for you. Thank you. Feel free to share any questions you have for Natalia or for us via email. And again, thanks so much for being here. We're just excited to kind of bring our community closer together. So with that being said, if we have no other comments, we'll close things out. This will be posted on the Ecopath website, and we'll see you next time. So thanks so much, and take care. See you, everyone.